Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Grit, Give, Recognize, Implement Time podcast. I'm your host, Steve Nathanson, CEO and founder of Strive for More. Today, we're going to talk about how do we create more fulfillment. First and foremost, this is one of the hardest questions to answer in life. It's very similar to what do I want to do in life? It's okay to struggle with this. You're not alone in that. It's very difficult to answer these kind of questions because we're often faced with what is it that I want to do? How do I achieve something? And left unknowing how to do that because it seems one, it could be too big. How do I even start to tackle that? And two, it's often easier in life to characterize what we don't like, what we don't want, what we don't care for, the quote unquote negative, the non serving. It's often easier to go down that path than the serving, the positive. But the good news is today, we're going to help you answer this question. How do we create more fulfillment? And a great place to start is starting to answer different questions that are a little bit more pinpoint. What brings me joy? What makes me smile? What do I have fun doing? If we start asking smaller chunked questions like this that are typically going to be easier. Oh, my grandkids make me smile. I love running, brings me a lot of joy. I have fun going to amusement parks, watching movies, hanging out with friends in the park, throwing the ball with my dog, maybe. Whatever it may be, they're easier to answer than what brings me fulfillment. So let's start there. Let's start chipping away at these kind of questions. And let's actually start writing that down, keeping a catalog of it. When we keep it all up here, it becomes too much. It becomes jumbled. We may inherently know things up here, but there's too much information. When we speak it, when we write it, we're forced to gain clarity because we're actually making our brains process all the information that's there. And it's easier to provide a clearer answer when we go through that process. The nice thing about writing it down, or even let's say you're going to speak it, and maybe on your phone, you have a voice memo, having that preserved gives you a record of it. So when you start asking yourself that question and pondering it again, now we have that resource to rely back upon. Oh, yeah, that's right. I've got this list. That's what's on there. I have this voice memo. That's what's in there too. Having that resource is key because often we're going to forget about what's up there. So let's get it out. Let's speak it. Let's write it. Let's answer small chunk questions. It's going to be a little bit different for each of us as well. And that's okay. When we talk about workplace fulfillment, this last point is very applicable because it's not only recognizing that we're unique in what fulfills us, it's the same for those we lead. Not everyone fits into this one size fits all model. We're all individually unique, and that is beautiful because it creates so many different things in this world. It's something that's often overlooked because we want a one size fits all kind of approach to handling it. What I love about coaching as a field is it actually gives you this one size fits all framework that is applicable to the individuality and uniqueness of everybody that you work with. And that's the same kind of thing that we're going to be talking about here. Because once we know fulfillment and what fulfills people specifically on the teams and how that's different for each of them, then we can start orienting tasks and activities towards that for them. We can start aligning them to what they get the greatest joy and pleasure and fulfillment from. Also applicable to across the board in life holistically is looking at fulfillment across everything. It's not just work or life, it's all of it. We do bring our whole person to work, just like we bring work home with us. There's a reason why those expressions exist. And when we have fulfillment in many areas of our life that are very important to us, we can be very satisfied and fulfilled. But what happens when one of those areas is off to the point that that's all we focus on? Even if that is, say, a relationship outside of work, that's going to bleed into work. How we engage with people, how we feel, how we think, how productive we are. The fact is, regardless of what area of life that's in or work that it's in, when something is out of alignment, completely not being fulfilled for us, it does impact the other areas. That is really important to note because if we truly have a lack of fulfillment in one area, it can really impact the other areas of our lives, the relationships we have, how we interact with people, and be the sole focus. And there does become a point where that has to be acknowledged, and we have to rectify that fulfillment because the impact on everything else in life becomes too great. So to do this, there is a activity called a wheel of life. I think it's a great tool that allows us to do it. Essentially says in a circle, write out the different areas that you chunk life into. It could be work, it could be relationships, it could be family, it could be hobbies, health, however you want to slice it up. We can use that as a guiding tool to ask in each of these areas, how fulfilled am I? Because this is also another way to start answering, how do we find true fulfillment? What does fulfill us? Because it holistically brings clarity to what's out of whack, what is in line, and lets us hone in on the specific area that, let's say, is a 2 out of 10. And so for us, when we do a wheel of life or any other similar activity or exercise, we can create a scale of 1 to 10 that brings more tangibility to the quote unquote untangible to let us know how fulfilled are we. Let's say 10 is the top, 1 is the lowest. Where do we land? What does that number actually mean to you? This can help us really further identify where to spend our efforts to figure out what perhaps is not fulfilling us, and then understanding that more fruitfully to be able to understand what will create fulfillment. Fulfillment, again, one of the hardest questions to answer. What fulfills me? How do I create more fulfillment? If we dive more deeply into it, if we ask ourselves easier, smaller questions to answer, and we start building that catalog of them and the answers there, then we're going to start creating the roadmap to being able to create greater fulfillment in our lives. It's also important to recognize that it's not just holistic across the board. It can be different in different areas, like we were just talking about with the wheel of life. Life, work, health, relationships, hobbies. However, we want to break that down for us individually. What does fulfillment look like in each of those areas? How fulfilled am I currently? If I'm not fulfilled, what is it that causes the lack of fulfillment? And then we can flip that and say, well, the opposite shouldn't fulfill me. That's another trick to help us. And then one of the other things we mentioned in the work specific setting is, as leaders, it's not just about fulfillment for us, and it is also about fulfillment for those that we lead, and it is going to be different for each of us. So if we want to create greater fulfillment in the work sense, if we understand what really fulfills each of our folks and we start aligning things towards that, we're going to make them happier. We're going to even make them more engaged, more motivated, and more fulfilled. I know I threw a lot out there quickly to you today, but this is a very great topic to talk through. If you have questions, please let me know. There's a lot of different ways we can approach this and apply it specifically, say, to you, to work. Please just drop me a line. And remember, until the next time, be the movement in your life.